In the rural landscape of southwest Missouri, an abandoned farmhouse held a dark secret for 3 decades. Discovered by a couple in December 1990, the decomposed remains of a young woman lay bound and discarded. This discovery would turn into a haunting mystery that would come to be known as the Grace Doe case. For 30 years, her identity remained elusive despite the tireless efforts from investigators as advances in DNA technology and forensic genealogy began to uncover the secrets of the past. A breakthrough finally came. It shed light on a case that had haunted a community who provided long-awaited answers to who Grace Doe truly was. On December 2, 1990, Randy and Linda Grower made a grim discovery while searching for cans along Oscar Talley Road near the border between Pineville and Anderson in Missouri. What the couple found was far more unsettling than discarded items: a skull near a farmhouse lying in the grass, accompanied by scattered bones, and the victim's clothing. The coroner's examination revealed that the 6th victim was likely in her 20s and had met a particularly brutal end. She had been bound with an array of materials including nylon and lead ropes, coaxial and telephone cables, paracord and clothesline. These were all signs of the cruelty inflicted upon her. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community as residents grappled with the realization that such brutality could happen in their midst. Law enforcement agencies, including the McDonald County Sheriff's Office, Coroner's Office, Missouri State Highway Patrol, Benton County, Arkansas Sheriff's Office, and University of Arkansas anthropologists all came together in pursuit of justice for Grace Doe. Detectives were told that it may be by the grace of God that her identity would be found. Despite the meticulous examination of the crime scene and the tireless efforts of investigators, the identity of the victim remained a baffling mystery. The circumstances surrounding her demise, a possible assault and a brutal slaying estimated to have occurred approximately 2 months prior to her discovery, only gave investigators more questions that they had no answers to. The presence of military grave paracord among the bindings did offer a clue. In the 1990s, it was exclusively sold to the military. Detective Lori Howard, who worked the case for years, also uncovered a disturbing detail. A 10-year-old boy had reportedly stumbled upon the remains about a month before the Growers, but his claims were dismissed by his family. Unfortunately, the boy's identity and the exact timing of his discovery remained unknown, leaving uncertainty surrounding the timeline of events. Lieutenant Michael Hall, who would work on the case for 15 years, later speculated that the victim was likely brought to the location rather than being kept there. The remote road, though secluded, was not far from state highways in 1990, making it accessible but not necessarily familiar to the perpetrator. Investigators initially believed that the perpetrator was from the area, but later reconsidered, suggesting that they might not have known the farmhouse well. Over the years, Sheriffs Schlesman, Evanson, and Hall continued efforts to solve the case, and more than 200 leads were investigated, but none produced solid evidence. The case went cold, and detectives continued to search for Grace Doe's identity with little success. Technological advances in DNA forensics gradually began to offer new hope. Grace Doe's profile was entered into Namus CODIS and the University of North Texas Center for Human Remains. No matches were found. In 2009, Detective Howard collaborated with a facial reconstruction expert and an FBI instructor to create an accurate likeness of Grace Doe. This image was circulated nationwide, generating numerous tips. Although there were many suggestions about her possible identity, her true name remained a mystery. One of the artist's renditions of Grace Doe that the sheriff's office circulated brought renewed attention to the case. In a bid to further the investigation, investigators partnered with OM to identify possible relatives of the deceased. This partnership would eventually lead to significant breakthroughs in the case. In January 2021, OM provided information on potential relatives identified through genealogy research. Investigators contacted Danielle Pixler, who revealed that she had a half-sister, Shauna Garber, who had been in foster care. Danielle had been searching for Shauna for over 28 years. Danielle agreed to provide a DNA sample, which was collected by the Topeka, Kansas Police Department and sent to OM for familial testing. After years of searching, in March 2021, the DNA confirmed that Grace Doe was Shauna Beth Garber. Shauna was born on March 1, 1968 in Lola, Kansas. Sadly, much of Shauna's life was as tragic as her demise. As the youngest of 3 siblings, Shauna's early years were marred by severe abuse at the hands of her mother. Living in Topeka, Kansas with her parents and 2 half-siblings, Shauna experienced unimaginable cruelty. One horrific incident saw her mother douse her in lighter fluid and setting her on fire, an act of brutality that resulted in all 3 children being placed into foster care. The separation from her family led to a fragmented childhood for Shauna. At only 6 years old, her half-siblings were sent to different homes and contact with her family was lost. Despite the abuse and upheaval, Shauna demonstrated remarkable strength and tenacity. A failed adoption put her back into the foster care system where she aged out. This led her to seek out family connections of her adopted family in the Veneta or Claremore area of Oklahoma. Shauna's adult life remained challenging, and she participated in a work program that provided transportation to and from her job at Hudson Foods. This program eventually led her to McDonald County, Missouri, where her life would come to a tragic and violent end. Shauna was 22 years old when her remains were found in December 1990. While investigators were glad to know for certain Shauna's identity, the frantic search for the person behind the tragedy continued. The McDonald County Sheriff's Office embarked on the next phase of the investigation, aiming to piece together Shauna's life from the time she aged out of the foster care system to the moment her remains were discovered. Lieutenant Hall and his team sought any information that could shed light on Shauna's movements and associations during her adult years. Paul believed Shauna may have been living in southeast Kansas or Joplin, Missouri, and possibly used the name Shauna Harvey. The hope was that learning more about her adult life could provide crucial clues to her untimely demise. A significant aspect of the investigation involved revisiting old leads and re-interviewing potential witnesses. Detective Lori Howard learned of a possible witness, a woman who, as a teenager, had reported hearing a scream in the vicinity on Halloween night in 1990. She and her friends were at a house down the road when a truck with a loud muffler drove by. They went outside to investigate and heard 2 vehicle doors open, followed by a scream. Then a single door slammed and the truck drove off. Whether this incident was related to the demise of Grace Doe was uncertain. The fact that the truck sped away quickly suggests the area might have been used simply as a dump site, but the witness's report of a scream complicates this theory. The scream implies that the victim might have been alive at the site. One theory that detectives pursued was the involvement of known serial perpetrators, notably BTK or Dennis Rader was considered a potential suspect due to his history of binding his victims in a similar manner. Rader, a city code inspector in Kansas, was arrested in February 2005 and would ultimately confess to 10 slayings in the Wichita area. He would be sentenced in August 2005 to 10 consecutive life prison terms. While there was no direct evidence linking Rader to Shauna, investigators did not rule out the possibility and interviewed him as part of their comprehensive review of the case. When Sheriff Rob Evanson spoke to him, Rader denied any involvement in Shauna's case. As the investigation continued, the diligent efforts of investigators eventually led to the identification of a suspect, Taylor Reeves, who passed away on November 15, 2021, was well known to law enforcement and had a reputation within the local community. Reeves lost his life at 58 years old from injuries sustained in a motor vehicle accident. According to detectives, they believe Reeves had allegedly picked Shauna up from the Tanglewood or Ginger Blue area along Missouri State Highway 59. Then he would bind her wrists and feet in a hog-tied position before moving her to the abandoned farmhouse where her remains would eventually be discovered. There, it is believed, he assaulted her and administered a fatal overdose. While Reeves's passing prevent the possibility of bringing him to justice, investigators were confident in the evidence pointing to him as the person responsible for brutally cutting Shauna's life short. Statements from witnesses and sources combined with physical evidence built a compelling case against him. Reeves had been on law enforcement's radar since the beginning as he was a menace to the community and served time in prison. However, there never was any evidence to tie him to the victim or the crime scene. That is, until he passed away. People were now no longer afraid to talk to the police. In 2024, the detectives were able to confirm Reeves was Shauna's perpetrator through 6 corroborated sources and a witness who came forward. Detective Lori Howard said of her last conversation with Reeves, "I went to his house and said to him, before you pass away, I want to be your last phone call because I want to know what happened to her." He laughed and he smiled. That was pretty much the extent of what I got from him verbally. If he had been alive, charges in the first degree would have been sought from the McDonald County prosecuting attorney. The identification of Taylor Reeves as the man who ended the life of Shauna Garber Harvey marked the end of a decades-long investigation. Detectives Howard and Wise, along with their predecessors and colleagues, had dedicated countless hours to solving this case. Their tenacity and the support from forensic experts, law enforcement partners, and the community played crucial roles in finding answers that evaded them for so many years, the McDonald County Sheriff's Office expressed gratitude to everyone who contributed to keeping Shauna's story alive. Of the past 30 years, the combination of advanced DNA technology, forensic genealogy, and diligent detective work ultimately led to this breakthrough. It changed the case status from an open investigation to being cleared by exception. Danielle Pixler, Shauna's half-sister, said, "I am just happy it is solved. I was 3 months old when we all got taken from my mom." She blames her mother for what happened to Shauna. Rob Ringwald, her brother, said, "Growing up without her, there was always just a hole in my life that I could not fill." Rob said Shauna was born 2 days before his second birthday. When he turned 18, he started looking for her. When he got married, his wife made it a mission. It was devastating just to find out that she had been sitting in a box for 30 years. Once Shauna's remains were identified, they buried her in Buckland next to her great-nephew. Though Shauna's life and demise were a tragedy, finding the truth provides some measure of closure for her loved ones and those that never stopped seeking justice on her behalf. In the late 1980s, Virginia's serene Colonial Parkway became the haunting scene for a series of chilling slayings that left a community gripped by fear. 8 lives lost, 4 double slayings, and a violent perpetrator who seemed to vanish without a trace. Among his victims were David Knobling, Robin Edwards, and Teresa Howell. Their tragic demise shrouded in mystery for decades, until advancements in forensic science would lead authorities to the truth. In the quiet dawn of September 23, 1987, the shores of Virginia's Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge bear witness to a violent tragedy. 20-year-old salesman David Lee Knobling and 14-year-old 8th grade student Robin Margaret Edwards were discovered lifeless and washed ashore by the unforgiving tide. Their story began on September 19 when Robin slipped out of her house to rendezvous with David at an arcade, a seemingly innocent act that would lead to their untimely demise. Days later, their bodies were found on the south shore of the James River in Isle of Wight County. They were approximately 100 feet apart, both victims of gunshot wounds. The gruesome scene painted a harrowing picture. Robin was shot execution style in the back of her head, while David was struck twice, once in the head and once in the shoulder, but both were found partially clothed with Robin's jeans unfastened and her bra around her neck. Investigators theorized that she could have been assaulted, but were unsure since it seemed that despite her being underage, she may have had an intimate relationship with David. Adding to the mystery was the discovery of David's black Ford Ranger just 2 days prior, parked eerily at the Refuge's parking area. The vehicle, with its wipers, engine, and radio still running, bore signs of a staged scene. The open doors and partially rolled down window fueled speculation. Had the perpetrator posed as a uniformed officer to lure the unsuspecting victims? The presence of David's wallet within the vehicle ruled out robbery, leaving investigators grappling with elusive motives. While they could not make sense of why this happened, they immediately linked the case to another, fearing that the same person may be behind it. As investigators delved into the chilling slaying of David Knobling and Robin Edwards, they found themselves drawn back to another dark chapter. A year prior, on October 12, 1986, the lifeless bodies of Kathleen Marion Kathy Thomas and Rebecca and Becky Dowski were discovered. Much like David Knobling and Robin Edwards, Kathy and Becky were young lovers whose lives had been brutally cut short. Both Kathy, a 27-year-old United States Naval Academy graduate, and Becky, a 21-year-old College of William and Mary Sr., had vanished after leaving a computer lab at William and Mary on October 9. The grim discovery of their bodies, their throats slashed so deeply they were nearly decapitated, painted a picture of unspeakable horror. Autopsy findings revealed the disturbing details of their demise: rope burns on their necks and wrists, signs of strangulation, and the heinous act of slashing their throats. The perpetrator, with callous disregard, covered their body, IES, and the vehicle with diesel fuel, yet stopped short from setting them ablaze. Despite the presence of over 100 latent and full prints, the perpetrator remained elusive, their identity shrouded in mystery. The absence of evidence of assault and the location of both women's purses within the vehicle ruled out robbery as a motive. Blood found inside the car led authorities to believe that the slayings had occurred elsewhere, further complicating the already baffling crime. The reason investigators believed all 4 slayings were connected was because the victims were all young couples targeted in or around Lovers Lane areas, with both locations only a 30-minute drive apart. Unfortunately, after David and Robin's case, even more people would fall victim under eerily similar circumstances. On April 10, 1988, Christopher Newport University students 18-year-old Cassandra Lee Haley and 20-year-old Richard Keith Call vanished after attending a party in Newport News. Cassandra, had left her family's residence in Grafton the previous day for their first date traveling in Richard's red 198 Toyota Celica. The next day, Richard's unoccupied vehicle was discovered at the York River overlook in Yorktown with their belongings inside but their purses and wallet missing, although there were initial theories of drowning. No sign of them was found after an extensive search of the river, leading to suspicions of foul play. A year later, on September 5, 1989, 18-year-old Anna Maria Phelps and her boyfriend's brother, 22-year-old Daniel Lowe, disappeared while en route to Virginia Beach. Daniel's car was later found abandoned at an Interstate 64 rest stop in New Kent County. Inside the vehicle, Anna Maria's purse was found, ruling out robbery. Then on October 19th, their bodies were discovered by hunters in a wooded area along Interstate 64 between Williamsburg and Richmond, though the cause of demise remained undetermined due to decomposition. Evidence suggested possible stab wounds on Anna Maria's bones and abdomen. A note found in Anna Maria's apartment in 2010 hinted at a mysterious meeting at a rest stop. This despite exhaustive efforts by law enforcement, including searches of the areas where the victims were last seen and appeals to the public for information. Crucial leads remained elusive. Years passed with no significant breakthroughs until January 2024, when authorities announced a significant development. DNA evidence conclusively linked the slayings of David Knobling and Robin Edwards to a man named Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. He was a local fisherman who had passed away in December 2017 at the age of 63. He owned a small 1976 wooden commercial fishing boat called the Denny Wade. During the time of the slayings, he worked as a fisherman farming clams and oysters. He also ran a business called Better Tree Free Service. He was also known to be an avid hunter and belonged to a hunt club in the Middle Peninsula region. Wilmer had no felonies on his criminal record, so his DNA was never put into the system. However, in the fresh probe of the cold cases, authorities looked into Wilmer as a suspect. When they learned he had passed away, they legally obtained his genetic material and submitted it to the Forensic Science Department to compare it to the evidence collected in the slayings. Virginia State Police would not say what led to the sudden decision to test Wilmer DNA profile, but he was the prime suspect in 1988 of the slayings of Cassandra Lee, Hallie and Richard Keith Call. One case of the Colonial Parkway slayings. His distinct blue truck with the license plate M. Raw was matched as belonging to a peeping Tom on the Colonial Parkway in 1988. Investigators surveilled Wilmer at his Lancaster County home and even got a warrant to search his trailer. Ultimately, Wilmer passed an FBI polygraph and police moved on to other leads. He is now again the prime suspect in this case. Cassandra and Richard's bodies are still missing, so DNA testing has been hampered. In 2024, they also linked his DNA to the case of Teresa Howell. Teresa Lynn Spa Howell's demise on July 1, 1989, outside the Zodiac Club in Hampton bore eerie similarities to the other slayings. At 10:10 a.m. that same day, construction crews working in the 500 block of Butler Farm Road found female clothing. This is about 11 mil from where Robin and David were found nearly 2 years before. The remains of an unidentified female were found a short time later in a wood line not far from the clothing. 3 days later, on July 4th, a missing person report filed in York County led to the identification of 29-year-old Teresa. Like the other victims, she had been assaulted and strangled. The connection between her slaying and the Colonial Parkway victims was strengthened by the DNA evidence linking Wilmer to the crimes with Alan Wilmer identified as the perpetrators and the slayings of David Knobling, Robin Edwards, and Teresa Howell. It brings a small sense of closure to a decade-long investigation that had left family and authorities searching for answers. Prosecutors for Isle of Wight County and the city of Hampton said that if Wilmer were alive, charges would be filed against him in connection with the 3 slayings. Virginia State Police and the FBI are now asking the public for information about Wilmer to see if he is possibly linked to more cases. 1 Hampton Roads Police Department recently checked Wilmer DNA to see if he was a match for one of their unsolved cold cases. Another local police department is currently reviewing all assault cases that match Wilmer modus operandi, and a third local police department spent part of January reviewing more than a dozen cold cases from the 1970s and 80s to see if Wilmer was ever on their radar and whether he could be considered a suspect today. But a legal loophole is leaving a potential trail of unsolved crimes unexplored. Virginia State Police says state law requires someone to have a conviction on their record before their DNA profile is entered into the government-run CODIS, and a conviction is something that this man will never have, although DNA evidence has not yet been confirmed. For all cases, law enforcement remains dedicated to exploring all avenues and leveraging advancements in forensic technology to bring closure to these unsolved cases. Media coverage of the Colonial Parkway slayings has been extensive over the years, with various outlets and platforms shedding light on the unsolved cases and the ongoing investigations. A joint statement from the Nobling and Edwards Amelies were released, which thanked the investigating law enforcement agencies. The statement said, "For 36 years, our families have lived in a vacuum of the unknown. We have lived with the fear of worrying that a person capable of deliberately taking the lives of Robin and David could attack and claim another victim. Now we have a sense of relief and justice, knowing that he can no longer victimize another. His passing will not allow us to seek out the answers to countless questions that have haunted us for so long."